Hello, everyone. So, in Africa, we believe that old people are so wise and young people are foolish. Yet, when you look closely in African history, it's old people who have been destroying Africa for their own personal benefits, and it's young people who fought for economic freedom in Africa. I think of Steve Biko, South African Steve Biko. This man has to be the greatest activist in African history. He came up with the Black consciousness movement. And I don't think Black people understand Steve Biko when he said Black consciousness. What he meant was, as Black people, let's be aware of mistakes that we made that got us in the situations that we were, and let's be aware of mistakes that we're still making that is keeping us where we are. This has to be the most powerful movement in the whole of the African history. And it was started by a young man. Steve Biko was murdered when he was 30 years old. So he had been fighting in his early 20s. Old people were fine, they were drinking. They thought, well, life is what life is. They accepted it. But here was a young man, together with other young people, fighting to liberate their people. I think of the Congo. Patrice Lumumba in 1960 won their independence. Patrice Lumumba was only 36 years old. He had been fighting in his early 20s as well. So this was a young man who decided we're not going to live the way that we live. We're going to control our own economy. And he fought together with other young people and he set our country free. So when you look everywhere in African history, it's young people who fought and died for economic freedom. It was always young people. I can say that about 80% of the people who died fighting for freedom and independence in Africa were young. And it takes a lot of wisdom for someone to come up with a movement like Black consciousness. It takes a lot of wisdom for a person to come and win independence for his country. Patrice Lumumba was only 36 years old when he was killed. So before that, he was younger than 36 years old. This man was fighting to unite a whole continent. This man, a young man, was trying to create the United States of Africa. That takes a lot of wisdom. So I wonder why we believe that old people are wise. Old people have experience. You know, when someone is old and he's married the wrong woman, he can now tell you, well, I married that woman. She was bad for me, so rather marry that woman. That's not wisdom. That's just experience. I would say wisdom is the ability to make the right decisions in situations that you haven't experienced before. And that's exactly what young people have. Young people have proved in history to be wiser than old people. And so what happened is after young people fought and won independence, colonial powers rewarded power to old people. Because they knew that they can't control young people, they knew that young people are too wise, they're too intelligent, they have strategies and plans, but these old people have nothing, they're old, they're tired, they don't think. When they see money, they're just gonna steal it and mess up everything. And so power was rewarded to old people by colonial powers. And then we as young people decided, you know what, we're going to let them take power because, you know, we're indoctrinated into believing that old people are so wise. So we fought for liberation. And then we allowed old people to come and take power, and they messed up everything. Every time that Patrice Lumumba looks at the economic situation in the Congo right now, that man probably cries. He was murdered in the most brutal way to set his people free. And what are his people using that freedom for? Rubbish, absolutely rubbish. So he probably regrets it wherever he was. When Steve Biko watches South African youth, he says, I fought and I died. So you guys can be going to the movies, so you guys can go to the places that you go to. And what exactly are you doing? It's like every time the economy is being messed up by these old people, it's like spitting on the death and sacrifice of these young people who fought to set Africa free. My solution is Africa always needed young people. And young people in the past generations really stood up and they did their part. So it's up to us, young people of this generation, to do our part. The majority of people in Africa are young people. Young people make up the vast majority of the population in Africa. So, which means that if we have political parties of young people everywhere in Africa, and the rest of young people vote for them, we can take power. And I can promise you that young people will change things. Well, you might say young people have no experience, but what happens in Africa when someone is named Minister of Economy, for example? It's also a man with no experience, but we trust him just because he's old. I rather trust a young person because when young people come, they'll learn fast. And if they make mistakes, they learn from those mistakes. With old people, it's mistakes and mistakes and mistakes. I can promise you now, 50 years from now, if we keep voting for these old people, nothing will change. Well, in fact, everything will change because everything just never stays the same. It either gets better or worse, and things will get worse if we do nothing. So my solution is we need young people to come to the party. I think of candles. When a candle is still tall and young, it can light up a whole room. But when a candle is short and it's dying, it barely gives lights. But for some reason in Africa, we're indoctrinated into believing that these old people who are like just old candles will bring lights into Africa. And these young people who are like young and tall candles won't do it. Well, that's interesting. So my plan is we young people need to stop wasting time. We need to stop wasting our potential. I believe in us. I don't believe in old people. I can never vote for an old person. The only time I'm going to vote is when there's a young person running, a competent young person with a competent political party running for presidency. Then I'll vote because I believe in young people. Africa always needed young people, and Africa does need young people, and Africa will always need young people.